you have Bungie who created Myth and Marathon. What's another game they created? Oni. A couple different games, and then they created Halo. And when they were creating Halo, they were really excited about it, really passionate about it because it was something new. And that's the thing we got to think about is like there was a time when Halo was a new thing. You know, like the idea of creating this new game called Halo. You know, there's probably a lot of people who are like, why don't you just make a Marathon 3? Why don't you just make or for all I know, there is a Marathon 3, though I think it's only 2. Maybe there is. I don't know.
You're right.
Or why don't you make a Myth 3? Like people are asking for that instead, and then they get Halo and they're like, oh my gosh, here we are coming up on the 6th mainline entry of Halo.
Crazy.
But, Bungie never expected for them to be just the Halo house, and they didn't want to be, so that's obviously why they left. But then 343 was created to be the Halo house. So I just feel like it's got to feel so different being in the industry as someone working at 343. Also, what is it like? And of course, I'm saying this as someone who doesn't have knowledge of what the industry is like behind the scenes. Like, I know it as much as a consumer can.
Yeah.
But if let's say you're somebody big at 343, like you're a big designer, maybe you are one of the big designers of Infinite, and you have discussions with designers from other studios like Naughty Dog, Santa Monica, the Coalition, whatever, Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder. I'm probably overthinking this, but I wonder what it's like to be like. When you're talking to someone from Naughty Dog or something, you're like, they're somebody who's putting out all these different games, and they know, since you're an employee of 343, they know you're someone who's only going to work on Halo.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder if when you talk to someone who works at 343, if it's like, and I don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this disrespectfully, I'm saying this in a very honest way. I wonder if it's almost less interesting to talk as another developer and to talk to 343 because you know that they only work on Halo. Whereas, some guy over at, Nintendo's like, oh, we're working on this really cool thing. And then some guy at Santa Monica's like, oh, we're doing this really cool thing. But everyone's like, oh, 343, I know what Bob's doing. He's working on Halo.
I know, I was going to say, you almost like, you can liken it down to like, or compare it down to like you and a friend. And like, you have the one friend who's like always going out and going to these different states and traveling and doing all this different stuff. Dude, I was at Santa Monica Beach. I was at Clearwater Beach. What have you been up to, man? And it's like, oh, I just been going out to the local zoo and checking it out, like normal. Love that zoo though. It's great. They just got a new
Still
giraffe.
painting my warthog.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I get where you're coming from. It's the sense of like, you can't help but feel, again, on one end that like sometimes there's 343 people probably envy those who are getting to do different projects, but then at the same time you probably have those other people who are like, man, I actually like envy your I don't want to say simplicity, that's not the right word, but just this sort of consistency of just knowing that you're going to be doing this. Because I mean, Bryan and I don't know it all, but I feel like it's safe to assume that like 343 is the kind of studio, just because of Halo itself, that is dependable. Like, it's gonna be there. You can expect it to be there and not go away and not really like cave under itself and anything like that, because where some of these other studios might, so I mean, there's a lot of like,
well, you just brought up a good question for me, don't let me forget it.
Yeah, okay, it seems like a more dependable job. So, but go ahead, what's your question, man?
Okay, so here's the thing, because you brought up like it's always going to be there type thing. Well, you'll see a lot of like downers in the Halo community who will be like, if Halo Infinite doesn't pop off, if Halo Infinite isn't amazing, that could be the end of the studio or whatever, or the end of Halo. But I mean, if we're honest here, like, and maybe I'm wrong, but isn't it? I kind of feel like Halo is a popular enough, reliable enough IP that draws enough traffic and brings in enough sales that to some extent, even if the games continue, and obviously Josh and I don't see Halo 4 and 5 as failures, but if generally, wide audiences consider a trend of failure continuing with Infinite and such, do we really see Halo games stopping? Like, I mean, things might change, but I feel like that name is reliable enough to always bring in a certain chunk of money. You know what I mean? You agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. It's the same with Star Wars. Like, I think most people agree, even if they love the sequel trilogy, that like there's a lot of like gaping. There's a lot of issues in there, and especially just in how it was they were fast tracked and developed, right? So, I think even with that, like you can still love this stuff, despite having a sense of like knowing it's not good. And where that kind of like correlates with Halo is like, kind of like Bryan said with Halo 4 and 5, it's like we wouldn't at all say they're failures. It's just they were received differently. And they're also like Bryan said before, like Halo 3 was very much like the end of an era, and you still had games that came out after that were still successful under the Bungie banner, but then 343 was like, you know what, we're going to give this another leg to stand on and like continue, give it more lifeblood, and it's going to have a different feel, different approach and everything. And I don't know, I think it's really just, it's got to be like, it's a complex thing though, because you got so many different people working there, and you got so many people coming and going, and like you said, Josh Holmes was the face of them. Well, not the face, but like
one
he
of
was
them.
the face,
Yeah.
And he moved on, and then I think Quinzel Hoyo, if I'm pronouncing his name right, I think he moved up, I think from what his previous position and stuff like that. So I mean, you have, it's so different each time, and you got to think that like, that, like I said in one of the other episodes, like, I feel like if this one isn't successful, then a lot of people are going to be like, wow, they, like, even me for like the first week, I'll be like, wow, they couldn't do it. They just, we waited this long and we went through this period and they didn't do it. And I'll come around to it. But I agree with Bryan, basically. Like, I agree with you, man. Like, I don't think they'll necessarily just ever stop, Well, maybe they won't do, maybe they'll get to a sense of finality within the whole like Master Chief, like, era, timeline or whatever, because eventually it's like the guy's going to get old.
Well,
but
see, this is the honest, to me, this is the honest truth. And it's one you almost hate to admit as a consumer, because you like to feel like you have some control as a consumer to say, if this one's not good, the community's not going to have it anymore.
Oh, that totally just made me think of something.
It's not really true. Let me give you some examples. Final Fantasy, apparently, 11 was an MMO, 12 was really good, 13, I'm just going off of what I see general consensus. I don't claim to be a Final Fantasy like huge person or whatever. 13 apparently was awful, many said, didn't like it, didn't do well.
That's what I've heard too. 14
was an MMO that launched in a poor state but got fixed later, and then 15, I've heard a lot of people have issues with 15 as well.
I hear it's mixed.
Yeah, but they just keep coming, like they just keep coming because they constantly make money, they're constantly worth making. Resident Evil, 4 was one of the greatest games of all time. 5 went downhill a little bit. 6 upset almost everyone. Boom, they came back with 7. Now they're remastering the original games.
Yeah, and then also working on 8.
Yeah, and then like Assassin's Creed, I remember like Unity got a bunch of crap. Call of Duty, like I remember everyone said Ghost was horrible. There's really no limit to once a series reaches its apex and it becomes this huge thing. It almost seems like nothing keeps it down. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah. No, I see. I think I see where you're going to. Is like you said this before, and it's stuck in my mind since. It's like all it takes is for like one good game. Like basically,
it sucks until it doesn't. That's what I said.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like, we've had so long without a mainline Halo game. So like, if this is good, then it's like it's gonna be like a huge refresher for everybody, right? Not just the game being good objectively and like subjectively, but like it's also gonna be like, wow, this is like this really is a fresh start and like. And let's say we don't get another Halo for 5 or 10 years, like a mainline one, the taste in everyone's mouths is going to be so good from this experience, whereas with Halo 5, it was a lot of like coming to terms with how you feel about this game and also knowing you're going to have to wait a while. And I was going to say too, like, you got to imagine it also is very tough for the 343 people, because like when we as people in the community are like excited for this game, but maybe there's not a whole lot of information coming out, it's you're kind of relying on one another and discussing and creating content and stuff like that, right? But then for them, they're having to put out like let's say the moment we get another video of sort of like we are 343, where they're just sort of talking and we're talking about working there, and you see shots of that of inside the studio and stuff like that. You got to imagine these people, like, they're the ones sort of curating the excitement for us, and that's got to be tough for them too, because where are they getting that from? Where are they getting that kind of like energy in their tank to put more energy in our tank? You know what I mean? So like that's got to be tough. Like when I saw Bonnie Ross sitting there, and she's talking about the game and talking about how they're so passionate and they're doing it, and it's like, I'm sure if she could probably just be completely transparent, she'd say, you know what, we're pretty tired too, and we've been working really hard at this, and it's been tough. Halo 5, this, that. If they could be more transparent, they probably would, but people would really. Some people would really rip into that and take that take that little excerpt out and go off with that, and they can't do that. So I think I'll pass it over to you, but I think that's got to be really tough. Like I really respect them and just anyone in that position when you're having just like the coalition. Although I don't they haven't quite reached that time yet, I think, as 343 has. But like, you're working on it for so long, it's got to be tough.